Alright, I am back with another video, and today we are doing another deity build, and this time we are covering Oghma. Oghma is basically the god of knowledge, inspiration, and invention, and his worshippers are basically just the kinds of people who would seek to, learn more about crafts, study, basically anything you can think of that relates to accruing knowledge basically falls under Oghma's banner. So wizards, who are learning magic and studying scrolls, bards, which Oghma himself is depicted as, being all about the arts and crafts and everything, druids with nature, clerics with, their like holy rituals and such like that, and accruing knowledge of various religious activities and such like that. Pretty much anything, artificers even, fall under Oghma's banner of just being these people who will go all across the world seeking knowledge to further their specific field, and a lot of people who are heavily into research will pray to Oghma even if he's not their primary deity. So this dude kind of has a lot going for him overall. And as such, with a kind of chosen of Oghma, I wanted it to be someone who can accrue knowledge from anywhere, being extremely skilled. I wanted to capture in a build exactly that kind of essence, being able to travel all over the game, accruing knowledge from every single place, being able to use all of your stats rather effectively for the most part, with the exception of maybe strength, and also just feeling like a very powerful character to play at the same time, because this build ended up being really strong, which is something I was not actually expecting, which really impressed me. I thought I was maybe splitting myself a bit too thin with, some of the stat spreads, and as you'll see on the right there, the stat spreads for this are a bit weird, but we do manage to patch it up in some ways. So, and as such, I'm really proud of how this turned out. You'll see as we go. But basically, as I said, the main idea for this build is being able to use pretty much as many proficiencies in the game as we can, to be able to interact with as many situations in the game as we can, while also being able to collect as many spells as possible, as well as useful abilities from many different classes. And we actually, this is going to be a three-class multi-class today, each focusing on kind of full casters from different, different, kind of primary spellcasting stats. So we're getting intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, and we're also going to be mainly focusing on being a bard, because that is kind of Oghma's whole deal. And I feel like that kind of idea of being like a traveling bard, spreading knowledge and gaining more back kind of as you go, maybe spreading that knowledge through song, through story, maybe even art. I mean, bards can be expressive of any art. I feel like there's a lot of room for this character to kind of be relatively interesting. Of course, Baldur's Gate 3 kind of regulates us to the more, traditional bard being music-based, but I feel like that still fits perfectly for the character. And with the amount of spells we're going to be getting, I'm also playing a gnome bard as well, because gnomes, specifically a forest gnome in this case, gave me a lot of things that I wanted to grab. I did initially consider, rock gnome as the race for this build, because they get, like expertise in history and such like that, and also them being kind of artificers by trade kind of give them a natural link to Oghma. But since I'm absolutely going to be going with the sage background for this build, because the sage is literally about gaining inspiration through accruing knowledge, and that comes with history and arcana proficiency, it didn't really make sense to kind of basically waste a race feature, although that would absolutely be the kind of the most lore-friendly one. But forest gnome gives us speak with animals right off the bat, or deep gnome would give us advantage on stealth checks. Entirely up to you what you want to pick there. I went with forest gnome because the idea of getting speak with animals, which again is another way of accruing knowledge, speaking to animals through druidic ways, that they would have picked up, because this person just learns everything. I imagine this character specifically, being a chosen of Oghma, has a photographic memory, but on like an absurd, magically enhanced scale, meaning they literally cannot forget anything. Which, to be honest, sounds like that would actually suck. But overall, I feel, again, this character is meant to just be kind of like a literal library of knowledge. Maybe even the binder of knowledge itself, given human form, or the binder of what is known. Those of you from the stream will know what I'm talking about, but basically there is kind of like this big binder of everything that Oghma kind of looks over, and I feel like this character could literally be that given form. I don't know, there's a bunch of different ways you could flavor this character, and I've kind of gone on a few tangents now. Long story short, extremely knowledgeable character, spells from pretty much everywhere, again kind of giving us like a mini game of where we try and accrue as much knowledge as possible, maybe by searching for scrolls and such like that, or even other books, like the side quest related books, like the things you get in Act 3, or the book you can get in Act 1, the Necromancy of Thay, stuff like that. So there's a lot of kind of fun ways to play this character, and again, it's going to result in something extremely powerful. You're seeing the combat footage right now, or perhaps I'm slowly fading it out as we're about to talk about the actual build. Going, gone. Okay. Again, full casters can be very strong. But without further ado, let's get into the build, because I'm going on so many tangents here. So, we're going to be kicking things off as a Cleric. Cleric makes sense for us with this build, as again, this is going to give us the ability to choose Oghma as our deity right away, giving us all the related dialogue options to that right off the bat. Being a Cleric to start is also going to give us access to simple weapon proficiency, which is something that we want, medium armor proficiency, as well as the ability to use shields, which again, we really like. I wanted medium armor for this build because Oghma himself is depicted as wearing chainmail, and I kind of wanted to go for like a kind of medium armor-ish look for this build, so it kind of looks, so this build still looks like someone who could be on the battlefield, while still kind of being this like flaunty, bardy, very knowledgeable wizard type. So yeah, this is going to give us a ton of utility overall, having both medium armor proficiency and simple weapon proficiency. Granted, you could start with Bard and still get the simple weapons, but you wouldn't get the medium armor unless you went with College of Valor or Swords, which we're not going to with this build. So I wanted to pick up medium armor from this, and it made sense again getting that early dialogue, getting a bunch of stuff as well, since we're going to be going with Knowledge Domain as our subclass. I mean, if that wasn't obvious, giving us both Command and Sleep. Now, Wisdom isn't our highest stat, so we're mainly going to be using our Cleric levels for utility, but you definitely at least want to start off with level 1 of Cleric to get all of these goodies. And Knowledge Domain comes with a few extra bonuses as well, but we'll get into that in a minute. I'm a bit all over the place today, but that's because I'm actually really excited about this build because it turned out much better than I could have hoped. Anyways, our cantrips that we're going to be getting at level 1 as well are going to be Resistance, Guidance, and Thaumaturgy. Amazing overall kind of like utility skills to have. Buffs on saving throws and ability checks are amazing, and getting advantage on intimidation and performance checks just feels right at home with this build. Again, intimidation is going to be great for as being a charisma dialogue check for us, as well as performance. We are a bard, gaining advantage on those checks is great for us, so I really like having that here. We've already gone, as I've already explained, Knowledge Domain. I've already explained the deity, but I'll quickly read the little blurb. Oghma is the god of inspiration and invention, sharing knowledge with the world through his bards and clerics. Well, we're a bard cleric with this build, so that makes sense. Unlike many other deities, Oghma accepts all moral alignments into his clergy, so this could totally be a Dark Urge build as well. Maybe there's a bit of a conflict between Baal and Oghma there. Who knows? Anyways, as for our ability scores, they do look a bit strange, but it does make sense if you think about it. I don't know why I'm so high energy today. Please forgive me. Strength at 8 is the one stat we don't really need, and again, there's only one skill proficiency tied to strength, and that is athletics, and again, we don't really need it, so this is being left at 8. Dexterity is also at 8. We are going to be using the Gloves of Dexterity to bump this up. Because, again, within a build that's so multi-ability score dependent, we want Con, we want Int, we want Wiz, we want Charisma. It's hard not to take the Gloves of Dexterity to just give us an instant 18 to make it so that we can put these points into other stats without worrying about it. However, it does take a while to get the Gloves of Dexterity, so what I would do maybe to start is actually drop Intelligence, as you might not need those levels right away, pop that into Dexterity like so, and then once you get and then maybe even use the Warped Headband of Intellect here instead to gain a 17 in Intelligence at the start, because you can get that way earlier, and then grab the Gloves of Dexterity and then kind of swap the stats back to where they were. Just a thought. But let's get into the rest of our stats. Constitution's at 14. This is going to be decent for concentration saving throws. Unfortunately, we don't have con save proficiency. However, there will be ways to get around that later if we so choose. Intelligence is at 16. It's going to be one of our primary spellcasting modifiers, as we are going to be taking wizard levels with this build, and this build is going to have a huge focus on finding scrolls throughout the game in order to gain as much knowledge as possible and gain as much as many spells as we can, filling up our spell book with all that we can find. Wisdom is at 12. Unfortunately, I did have to kind of pick one of our main spellcasting stats to be a bit lower, as I couldn't justify dropping Constitution to 14, and Wisdom at 12 does us just fine. We're not taking that many levels of Cleric with this build, so we can just pick up utility spells that don't require our spellcasting modifier anyway, and 12 is still going to be great for all of these saving throws and dialogue checks that we're going to be needing it for, especially since gnomes gain advantage on Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma saving throws, so we're pretty much never going to be failing those anyway. As well as Charisma being at 16, because it is going to be our main spellcasting stat. We do take most of our levels in Bard with this build, so it made sense to have that as high as it is. Skill proficiencies. Thanks to being a knowledge cleric, we are going to get 2 expertise, which is nice. We gain a little bit of extra stuff here. Because of our background, we've got Arcana and History. We somehow also have Arcana from our class. That's a weird bit of overlap, but like I said, Sage is going to give us Arcana and History. I think that's because of the expertise, maybe. Yeah, it's just, we're getting expertise. I think it's just a bug in the kind of visuals here. We can also pick up Religion, which makes sense. We definitely want Religion proficiency as a cleric, and I think gaining expertise in the Arcana and the History just makes sense for a build like this, as well as Insight. I just felt like a nice skill to have on this build. I mean, Persuasion is here, but we are going to be kind of getting these skills a different way later on, so I kind of want to make sure we spread out our skills a very specific way to kind of optimize our skill proficiencies here and how we get them throughout the build. So Religion, Insight, and kind of go for these expertise here to kind of get a nice well-rounded kit. Now, as for the rest of these levels, you can kind of take them in any order you'd like. The build will still feel pretty strong overall. I find that in the early game, again, if you wanted to take like the first kind of couple of levels of Cleric, even though our Wisdom is a bit lower, those utility spells are still really going to help out, and you can still use weapons and things like that kind of in the interim. If you want to go straight into the Bard levels, getting our main class stuff, going straight into that, kind of getting the basic kit that we want, or if you want to go into Wizard to start getting scrolls as soon as possible, you can do that. It's entirely up to you kind of which classes you want to take in what order, other than the fact that I recommend starting as a cleric. I'm going to be showing kind of the classes in order from kind of least to most levels taken, so I'm going to kind of just show the cleric levels, then I'm going to show the wizard levels, and then I'll show off the bard levels at the end. But again, mix and match how you see fit. But, so let's talk about Cleric Level 2. Cleric Level 2, as a Knowledge Domain Cleric, is going to give us our Channel Divinity, Turn Undead, which is always nice to have, as well as Knowledge of the Ages, allowing us to gain proficiency in all skills of a chosen ability. Now, for us, I find that the best way this is going to work out for us is if we use Knowledge of the Ages for our, charisma skills. So that means we're going to be getting Deception, Intimidation, Performance, and Persuasion all in one foul swoop, which makes perfect sense. That's the only skill we haven't really touched yet. Otherwise, we'd kind of be wasting the potential of this skill by picking Wisdom or Intelligence, as we already have proficiencies in those skills, and we'll have ways of filling out those skills more as we go with our Bard levels. So I feel like Knowledge of the Ages for Charisma makes perfect sense for this build. As well as for our prepared spells, I've gone with Sanctuary because it is the best utility spell in the game. This is going to give you plenty of turns to set up potential spell effects, especially powerful concentration effects like Hold Person or Monster or something like that. So Sanctuary is absolutely essential for this build. Create or Destroy Water is also another great utility spell. You never know when this is going to be useful. Putting out fires, setting up your allies for, or even yourself, for cold and lightning damage, being with the vulnerability that it provides. Definitely a great utility option to have. And finally, it's entirely up to you what you want to pick. A healing spell can be decent. Again, we're going to be able to get we're going to be getting maximum spell slots with this build, so you can get some pretty decent use out of healing spells if you like. But I think Bless is a decent early game option just to kind of give you and your whole party a good buff. I think that works, but it's entirely up to you. Right, we're not going to be going with Cleric Level 3, we only really want 2 levels of Cleric just to get those powerful Level 1 utility options as well as Knowledge of the Ages, so let's jump over to Wizard next. Wizard is going to give us a ton of stuff, like I said. Spell Scribing from Scrolls, giving us that minigame to play throughout the game where we go for as many different scrolls as we can to basically be searching for knowledge. Again, that's kind of the whole point of this build, so I had to get wizard levels in here somehow. As well as being able to pick up a ton of different spells and cantrips just from the class itself anyway, at level 1. So, with our cantrips, it's entirely up to you what you want to pick. I would say kind of getting a nice core of useful kind of damage cantrips is really nice to pick up with Wizard, as we can get a lot of these other utility options through our Bard levels, which is where I'd prefer to get them from. So Firebolt for a pretty decent ranged cantrip for just pure damage. Ray of Frost is another decently damaging cantrip, which can also reduce target's movement speed, and Shocking Grasp to be able to have a melee option for when we need it, and has advantage on creatures with metal armor, and the targets cannot use reactions. So if you need to get away, cast this in melee, and then skedaddle on out of there. As for our spells, now this is kind of like, again, picking spells with kind of our build here is going to be a bit strange, as pretty much every level is going to be a pick your favorite situation, as literally any spell works for this build. That is the point. The thing is with I would definitely pick utility options early on for Wizard, so things like Shield, which is going to always be reliable. Magic Missile is a really fun spell. Find familiar, I just absolutely love thematically. I feel like this character would absolutely have a familiar on hand. And then utility options like the following: Featherfall, Longstrider, Enhanced Sleep, just to be able to get around the map a bit easier. But again, it's a pick your favourite situation. It does not matter. I mean, you can see the scrolls I have already scribed as for the purposes of just kind of showing off what this build could potentially be capable of. I mean, look at this shit. So yeah, it is definitely a pick your favorite situation, like I said. Grab whatever you feel like. Now, at Wizard level 2, we do get a choice of subclass, and a lot of these will work, but there was a specific one that had a particular tie to Oghma: Divination. Oghma has specific ties to kind of divination as a whole. A lot of diviners kind of use his, kind of pray to him and kind of use his influence to be able to divine things, as well as he himself just having abilities related to divination. I mean, you can look it up on the Forgotten Realms wiki page. It's there. And again, Divination is just a great skill to have, even at only 2 levels of Wizard, giving us our portent die, allowing us to, after each long rest, we gain 2 random portent die, and during the day, we can use our reaction to change the die of any attack roll or saving throw rolled near us to one of our portent die. So, for those of you who aren't really sure how this works, if that's a bit confusing, say, for example, we start the day and our portent die are a 2 and an 18, and we are about to get hit by a hold person spell, let's say. Now, the enemy rolls, let's say, a 22, just as an example, which is definitely going to work on us, but we can use our portent die, which is the 2, to change the result of that 22 to just a 2, meaning that that spell will now fail. Or, if we maybe roll a fireball, but most of the enemies pass their saving throw, or something like... Oh, no, that's not really how it works, but you get what I mean. You can just change the results of die. This video is all over the place today. My apologies. Portent is a very powerful ability, though, and it fits perfectly for Oghma. But things like Transmutation, if you want to do Alchemy, Abjuration, if you want... Like, Abjuration can work if you want Arcane Ward, which would work well with Sanctuary. Like, say, Divination for Portent, Transmutation for the Alchemy... Probably not Illusion, and Evocation if you just want to make it so your big blaster spells don't affect you and your allies, which is also very valuable, but for the sake of being on theme and directly connecting to Oghma, Divination makes the most sense. We also do get more utility spells here. I mean, again, just grab whatever. We're going to have Intelligence as a really decent spellcasting modifier by the end of this, so just pick whatever you want. It does not matter. Next up, at level 5, we're going to be going now into our main multi-class. I only want 2 levels of Cleric and 2 levels of Wizard, because that gets us everything we need from those 2 classes to be able to kind of get the basic foundations of this build going. And again, you can take these levels in whatever order you want. It doesn't really matter to me, but I feel like actually starting with these levels will work. The early game will feel a bit weird, but again, you have teammates to back you up, and once we get straight into the Bard levels, you're going to really start to feel this build kick off. So, let's get into it. Cantrips, Vicious Mockery, absolutely, we want this as our bread and butter kind of cantrip to be able to inflict disadvantage on attack rolls, dealing a bit of psychic damage, which is not very well resisted in this game until you kind of get to the very final encounters of the game, so I feel like Vicious Mockery is just a nice cantrip overall, and again, it's more cantrips. We love cantrips, as well as friends, just to give us advantage on those charisma checks we get from Knowledge of the Ages. We also do get to pick full spells, and as you can see, we've got most of them covered already, including Speak with Animals, even though it's not kind of showing here, so let's just pick what we don't already have. Fairy Fire, Dissonant Whispers, Tasha's Hideous Laughter, and Heroism. As for our starting instrument, I personally like a lute with this build, but I don't feel like any of these will work. I just like the lute because, again, I think of Bard, and Oghma is depicted using a lute as well, so I think that's going to work out for the best. We also do gain an extra skill proficiency, and I'm going to take it off of Deception because, again, we're kind of using Knowledge of the Ancients for these final form, so let's pick up another one. I think Investigation makes a ton of sense for this build, being able to analyze clues and solve mysteries, but this could also be investigating an ancient library looking for deliberate secret magic resources that only you would know to find. Something along those lines. With Bard level 2, we're getting all of that Bard goodness like Jack of all trades, adding half of our proficiency bonus rounded down to ability checks that we are not proficient in. That's just more proficiencies, more ability checks succeeding. We love it. Song of Rest also giving us a 3rd short rest per long rest is just so good. Love it for its utility. We also do get access to another spell at this point, and again, we've taken literally everything in some shape or form. So I don't know. Charm Person, Animal Friendship, it's one of those two. I mean, there's nothing else. Maybe we could have picked up Thunder Wave here and maybe chose something else from our wizard levels again. You can optimize this further. Bard level 3, we get to pick our subclass, and of course we're going with College of Lore. College of Lore is literally all about accruing knowledge. You pursue beauty and truth, collecting knowledge from scholarly tomes to peasants' tales, and use your gifts to hold both audience and enemies spellbound. I've just punched my mic, I apologise, I probably sounded awful. So College of Lore absolutely makes sense for this. It is the most spellcastery of the Cleric subclasses, of the Bard subclasses. So I feel like it makes perfect sense to pick this up. We are now a Divination, Wizard, Knowledge, Cleric, College of Lore Bard. Information overload. We also do gain access to level 2 spells at this point, and it really is a pick your favourite situation, and my favourite for this is Hold Person. It's going to give us a ton of utility as a support character for our team. And we also do get to pick up 3 more proficiencies and 2 more expertise. Oh, this build's awesome, man. I'm going to suggest picking up maybe Stealth, Sleight of Hand, and Nature. Just giving us, again, more general knowledge. Although I could also see, instead of maybe Sleight of Hand, perhaps Medicine? Medicine would make a ton of sense as well, also allowing you to dip into the alchemy side of this game way easier. And again, I would probably pick this if you went for like the Transmutation Wizard route. God, there's just so many things you could do with this. Pick your favourite, genuinely. Except again, maybe leave the Charisma options out because we already have those covered. At Bard level 4, we are going to get our first feat, and I think we're going to take an ability score improvement and bump up our Charisma. At the moment, Charisma is still our main spellcasting modifier as a Bard, but actually you could bump up Intelligence if you found enough scrolls at this point that you feel like you're using those spells more. It's entirely up to you. Build this however you like. Again, you may have gotten these levels earlier. We do also get another cantrip, and we'll grab Mage Hand, as well as another level 2 spell. Again, another pick your favourite situation. It doesn't really matter. Any of these spells would work for us. I quite like Enhanced Ability as a utility option because it gives us advantage on ability checks with any chosen ability that we like, meaning that we can make our skill proficiencies even greater. Basically, with this build, it's going to be almost impossible to fail skill checks, if you know what you're doing. At Bard level 5, we're going to get some of the most important features of Bard. Font of Inspiration, allowing our Bardic Inspiration to recover on a long or short rest, meaning both our Bardic Inspiration, which is now a D8, and our Cutting Words, which is now also a D8, are going to be extremely effective. We also do gain access to level 3 spells at this point, and honestly, again, choose whatever you like. I quite like Hypnotic Pattern, is one of my favourite control spells in the game, so I'm going to pick that up here. At Bard level 6, we're going to get a few awesome features. Counter Charm, allowing us to give allies within 9 meters a saving throw, basically advantage on their saving throws against being charmed or frightened. Not the greatest ability in the world, but it does summon a magic spectral music box that plays a music box rendition of the main theme of the game, which is just brilliant. So I love this ability just for the flavour, as well as being able to pick up Magical Secrets, giving us access to a wide array of spells from across all the different classes, allowing you to gain even more. One spell I am going to recommend picking up is Counterspell, because this is the only way we can actually get Counterspell on this build, as there is no Counterspell scroll in the game. So I'd recommend this being one of your 2 choices at the least. However, I feel like you can pick whatever else you like. Cool Lightning if you want to use lightning spells, or Lightning Bolt, which again you can learn from scrolls. Fireball could be good, but again you can also learn that from scrolls. Spirit Guardians would be absolutely awesome on a build like this, although we do have a lot of concentration options. Haste you could pick up, Slow you could pick up, Misty Step, Armour of Agathis, Scorching Ray, Mass Healing Word, Eldritch Blast if you really wanted to go so far. Your world is truly your oyster. Grab whatever you want. And we also do gain another level 3 spell from the usual spell list, and I like Glyph of Warding. It's one of my favourite spells in the game, so I'm going to go with that. At Bard level 7, we are going to gain access to level 4 spells, and I'm going to be grabbing Greater Invisibility just because I really like the spell. And finally, at Bard level 8, we do gain access to another feat, and I'm going to use an ability score improvement to bump up our intelligence. Now, you may think it's a bit strange that we don't have either of our primary spellcasting stats maxed out on this build, but we do have ways of achieving this if we like. And of course, while I haven't gone for it with this build, you could absolutely use Ethel's Boon to optimize this build further if you so choose. Or even the Mirror of Loss, but I don't usually go into that one. We also do gain access to another level 4 spell. I quite like Confusion, Dimension Door, Freedom of Movement. Any of these will work. Freedom of Movement is a really nice utility spell to have, so I'll probably pick that one up. And that is the build. Overall, what you're going to be getting out of this is everything. Like, pretty much everything a spellcaster could want, you're going to get on this build. The learning spells from scrolls from wizard, all the bardic utility spells, every utility spell, offensive spell, anything you can think of, you basically have access to in some shape or form. You want Eldritch Blast, pick it up from Magical Secrets. You want all, like, the massive amount of skill proficiencies and ways to use them effectively, enhance ability, and of course all the proficiencies that we get naturally. You want a flipping Kamehameha, pick up a scroll as Sunbeam. You even get access to the, like, kind of quest exclusive spells, things like the scrolls from the level 3 from the Act 3 library in Sorcerer's Sundries, or even things like the Necromancy of Fae. You can get Shovel, for crying out loud. Every single thing you want to do with this build, you can do it. Build it in any ways you want. Trickster Control, big Evocation Blaster. You can do anything here, and it would all make sense for this character. It feels powerful, but it feels fun. It feels freeing to make a build that is so open-ended, and is still so effective in so many different ways that, I don't know, I'm just really, really happy with this one. But anyways, let's get into the equipment and some other things. Ignore the myriad wall of spell scrolls here. I was just kind of inscribing a bunch of random ones to just kind of show you what you can do with this build if you really want to. Anyways, let's get into the equipment, as there's a lot to talk about here. Now, for the most part, we are using kind of the main kind of all-powerful spellcaster kit, like the stuff you'd normally want to go for in Act 3 if you're playing a full caster, such as the Markiplier Staff. This is going to give you a +1 bonus to your spell save DC and spell attack rolls. Any gear that can give you a +1 bonus to DC and attack rolls for spells is going to be important for this build. Again, we don't have maxed out spellcasting stats here, but because we can stack so many pieces of equipment that give us these bonuses, it's not really going to matter at the end of the day, as all of our spells are still going to be extremely effective. In my testing with this build, I can't think of any time where an opponent actually saved against our spells, so you can see how effective it is. We also gain Arcane Battery, allowing us to cast a spell without a spell slot, which means we can use multiple level 6 spells per long rest, which is really, really nice. You can use the Markiplier Staff and then swap to something like the Staff of Spell Power to get this twice a day. It's really, really fun, and again, since we have access to pretty much every level 6 spell in the game, barring a few, or barring like one or two, like, you have a ton of options to just explode and really experiment with the level 6 spells, as most of my builds don't really get an opportunity to do so. This is a +2 weapon at the end of the day, so if you really have to bonk someone with this stick, you can bonk someone with this stick, as well as you gain Kareska's Favor, another big dollop of knowledge, allowing you to basically imbue yourself with an elemental energy and gain more spells and an additional status condition based on the element you choose. Fire gets heat, thunder gets reverberation, cold gets encrusted with frost or chilled. One of those two. Like, there's so many different, and you get access to really powerful spells. In fact, I think even level 6 options. I think the lightning variant gets Chain Lightning, which is freaking nuts. So honestly, an amazing, amazing staff that, again, fits the build perfectly. It's all about gaining knowledge. Now we have knowledge of the elements too, and the statuses that come with them. Perfect for this build. But again, this is an Act 3 option, but there are some early game options to get you started. The Spell Sparker is a very, very easy one to obtain. Whenever you deal damage with a spell or cantrip, you gain lightning charges. Stacking up those lightning charges will allow you to do an additional 1 lightning damage and a +1 to your attack rolls while you have those charges, and when you accrue 5 or more, your next attack will deal an additional 1d8 of lightning damage, so a nice stat to have. In Act 2, you can pick up the Incandescent Staff, which would give you an extra usage of Fireball, as well as Firebolt if you decided not to take it as your starting cantrip, as well as giving you resistance to fire damage, and ranged spell attacks gain a +1 to hit as well. Overall, a pretty decent staff. And finally, the Morning Frost, which again comes with a little side quest to get it in Act 1, where you have to collect the different parts and learn how to forge it. Again, learning, knowledge, all that sort of thing. It gives you an extra 1 cold damage when dealing cold damage, and dealing cold damage with a spell can possibly inflict Chilled. Chilled will basically make an entity vulnerable to cold damage and resistance to fire damage, so you can really stack on that cold damage if you so choose, and you also get Ray of Frost if you didn't already choose it. Pretty fun options all around there, but of course the Markiplier Staff is absolutely what you want to be going for here. No ranged weapons on this build, but you could fit one on here, I believe. I don't think there's any reason to, though. I don't think it really fits with the vibe of the build, so I'm quite happy to just have a melee weapon here. You can also have a shield. I didn't go for a shield on this build specifically for aesthetic purposes, but there's no reason not to, so I'll quickly show off a shield that I've never really shown off before. Abdel's Trusted Shield. Comes with the standard shield bash, but it also gives you a unique feature, protection from missiles once per short rest, allowing you to make ranged weapon attacks against you have disadvantage and their damage is halved, basically just giving you even more defense and that usual +2 AC for a really decent armor class overall. So this build can actually be surprisingly decent in front-facing combat as well with such a high AC, but I thought I would just point out the possibility there. Right, let's get on to the actual equipment now. The Hood of the Weave, pretty much a guaranteed must-get for this build, giving us a +2 bonus to spell save DC and spell attack rolls, which is great. That's going to bump up the effectiveness of all of our spells. But of course there are other options as well. If you really want to max out that charisma, the Birthright Hat will do just that, giving you a +2. But in the early game, as I said, you could grab the Warped Headband of Intellect if you'd rather make Int a dump stat at the start and put those points into other stats, or if you don't care for getting 18 intelligence in general, you could dump this, pop the Warped Headband of Intellect on there, and put those points into other things, maybe swap out the Gloves of Dexterity for something else. Again, feel free to play around with how you want to build this build with all of the spell save DC kind of stacking gear we have. The difference between 17 and 18 int probably won't matter that much. It's entirely up to you. I just kind of went for what I thought was probably the safer bet overall, but again, pick your poison. But if you don't care about any of that, the Holy Lance Helm is a pretty nice early game option since we have access to medium armor, basically meaning that creatures who miss their attack rolls against us have to make a dex save or take a bit of radiant damage, and it also gives us a +1 to our con saves, making our concentration a bit better. So entirely up to you what you want to grab, but I feel like the Hood of the Weave is the strongest option in the late game. Next up, the Cloak of the Weave. This is mainly just here to give us that extra bonus to spell save DC and spell attack rolls, but it also comes with Absorb Element, allowing us to take half the elemental damage from an elemental attack once per short rest, and then our next attack we do deals an additional 1d6 of that absorbed element. Not really going to come up that much, but we're mainly there for the arcane enchantment buff. Next up, the 1T Scale Mail. This is just a personal choice of mine for flavor purposes. Again, I wanted to kind of get that like padded chainmail look, kind of from the Art of Oghma that's on the Forgotten Realms wiki, with our own little colourful flair to it. The dye I'm using for all the gear here is the Jet and Pink Rose dye, so I thought it looked quite nice overall, and it's also pretty good because it adds our full dexterity modifier, which is why we have such a nice AC, that +4 right there. And also it gives us a +1 bonus to our initiative rolls, meaning that combined with our high dexterity from the Gloves of Dexterity, we are going to be able to set up our powerful spells before our enemies are able to move. So I actually feel like this does have some value beyond just fashion, but if you care just about AC, the Armour of Agility or something like that, or even light armor can work quite nicely here. It's entirely up to you. Gloves of Dexterity, as I already mentioned, to set our Dexterity to 18 and give us a +1 to attack rolls. And finally, the Boots of Striding. When we cast a spell that requires concentration, we gain momentum for 1 turn, meaning we can move around a bit easier, as well as while we are concentrating, we cannot be knocked prone or moved against our will. This basically just stops us from being knocked prone from big enemy attacks, such as the Steel Watchers, which would instantly end our concentration on those spells. This is kind of a throwaway slot. I feel like just having that utility of not being knocked prone to be very, very nice, but you can swap that out for something else if you so choose. Next up, onto the accessories, and the best part about this build is actually pretty much all of the main pieces kind of here are obtained in Act 1 or 2. The Cloak is Act 3 and the Hood is Act 3, but of course I provided alternatives, and I don't usually provide alternatives for cloaks, as I don't find they're exactly necessary for builds in most cases. But again, the Cloak of the Weave will do fine, but up until then, the Cloak of Protection or something will work just fine. But let's get on to the accessories. We have the Amulet of the Devout here. Basically, this gives us a +2 bonus to spell save DC, making all of our spells a lot better, as well as giving us an additional use of Channel Divinity, which isn't as useful in this build, so we're pretty much always going to be picking Charisma, but if you find you really need that one ability, and you kind of need to swap out of Charisma for a bit, then you can do so without too much punishment. This is mainly here for that bonus to spell save DC, though. But this is actually an Act 3 option, and another good alternative option would be the Necklace of Elemental Augmentation, just making all of our elemental cantrips like Firebolt, Rare Frost, and Shocking Grasp that bit more powerful by adding our spellcasting modifier to the damage dealt. And that can just be a decent Act 1 option until you get this anyway. Now, the 2 rings I have here are kind of throwaway slots, but they do have purposes for the build. The Ring of Mental Inhibition allows you to, whenever your foe fails a saving throw against one of your spells, and we have so many spells that this could be literally anything, they gain mental fatigue, meaning that they have a -1 penalty to wisdom, intelligence, and charisma saves for every turn remaining. This basically just means that if with the wide array of spells we can cast, we can basically compound this, like kind of build up this status to make sure that every spell we use against our opponent is pretty much guaranteed to hit, especially with the very damaging effects like the hold spells or something like that. So I felt like it was just a nice little buff to this, but again, you can swap this for whatever you like. As well as the Crypt Lord Ring, it just gives us the access to the level 6 spell Create Undead, which just adds another powerful body onto the field to take hits and deal damage, which is always nice to have around, but again, you can swap this out for whatever you like, it doesn't really matter. And again, these are just all of the kind of scrolls you can kind of learn. These are just some examples. I mean, you can see my spell book here. We're able to just stack on a ton of powerful options here. Things like Globe of Invulnerability, Otto's Irresistible Dance, Sunbeam, Chain Lightning, the Conjure spells, Fire Shield, which I found to be really nice for this build, Hold Monster, which is just great, Telekinesis, Seeming, Cloud Kill, Cone of Cold, Slow, Lightning Bolt, Haste. All of these spells come from scrolls, and again, actually finding a really powerful scroll in-game is going to feel so good with this setup, because again, you feel like you just got that one really ultra-rare thing that makes your build so powerful. And again, sometimes you can get really powerful spells like these very early in the game. I've seen Auntie Ethel drop level 6 scrolls before in Act 1. Like, you can pick these up at some interesting times if you kind of just know where to look. So feel free to kind of like explore, go into every nook and cranny of this game and see what you can find. And you can see we have all of these awesome, amazing spells here. I love this build. Again, the amount of like freedom you have with this and it all fitting within the theme of the build as well. Oh, I love it. But anyway, that is the build. As I said, utility, damage, whatever you want, this build can do it. Again, it's not going to be swinging a sword anytime soon, and Oghma is usually depicted with a longsword, so if you wanted to kind of finagle this build to maybe grab Fala Aluv, I could see maybe Dual Wielder working with the Markiplier Staff in the offhand and Fala Aluv in the main hand. Bit of a Gandalf setup, that could be fun. But again, it's entirely up to you, but I think what I've presented here today is absolutely going to work. Tons of skill proficiencies, tons of just spells, just everything. And the Cutting Words feature, the Song of Rest, all of that sort of thing. Arcane Recovery also works, I guess, a little bit, but the Knowledge of the Ages as well to gain proficiency on whatever you like. Like, I just love it. I love this build. I think it's come together really, really nicely. And I apologize if my thoughts have been all over the place with this build, but with this build being so open-ended, there's not many concise thoughts to have, because again, you can turn this into whatever you want. This build genuinely gives you so much freedom that, I don't know, it just feels great to me. And I mean, you can see in the combat footage, I didn't even get attacked, because they couldn't. Hold Monster on the Steel Watcher, Sanctuary to get set up, and then Fire Shield on top of that as well. Like, when I did get attacked, I think eventually they did take damage, but and like the enemies took damage. I didn't take damage. It was insane. Like, it was such a short combat encounter that, yeah, I mean, it just goes to show the power of this build. And this build will feel good as you progress. Again, you can kind of change up the levels however you like. I do still recommend starting with Cleric, but you'll feel the progression of this build quite nicely. I would say maybe, if you really wanted to get those Bard levels as early as possible, take that 1 level dip of Cleric, do 1 level dip into Wizard to get the ability to scribe spells, go the rest of the way, Bard, maybe to Bard level 6 or so, then find a way to pick up those other 1 level dips here and there, you know, stuff like that. Experiment with it, but I do think this build is going to feel really, really good in progression. And again, having that kind of side objective to go for, you know, different scrolls and stuff like that to expand your knowledge just feels really, really fun. Anyways, couple of things here. Stream this weekend, Saturday at 2:15, we're going to be doing a Deity Build stream to hopefully wrap up the rest of the selectable deities in-game, so feel free to come to that, as well as I am premiering a big video on Saturday, which I spent over a month working on, so I really hope you guys enjoy that. We're going to be premiering that before the stream, and then jumping straight into stream right after. Anyways, that is going to do it from me today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.